Welcome to Animeverse Fanfics, a world where your favorite anime characters step into new adventures. Here, fanfictions come alive through voice, animation, and imagination. Every chapter has led us to this moment, and now the story reaches its final act. Let's step into part 4 of Another Me I Haven't Met, beginning with Chapter 12. Chapter 12, care to repeat that? Naruto asked with glowing red eyes, hair floating and roiling like snakes behind him. The dynamics in the room immediately shifted with the arrivals of the new contestants. Sasuke Uchiha straightened up, only looking slightly unnerved by the angry and blonde and his other self. I was only trying to understand why this child possesses the Sherry Dash. Then ask me. Naruto cut in. Glare not wavering for a second. Ask me rather than my child who is barely 16. My child that has every right to bear those eyes and every right to keep those reasons to himself. You are not entitled to information from him, and I will not allow you to bully my child into saying more than he wants to. Taking advantage of the distraction, Menma discreetly shuffled backwards towards his papa. Partly because he was so glad to be with his parents again, especially after the roller coaster that made up the past hour dash, mostly because he was a little terrified of his mama, even if he knew that none of the killing intent flooding the room was in any way directed at him. His papa gently placed a hand on the small of his back and leaned down to whisper into his ear, all while keeping his eyes firmly trained on his counterpart. Find your brother and pack your things, we're leaving. If you need help, call. Menma nodded and bolted from the room without so much as a glance back. He needed to find his twin. Ask me rather than my child who is barely 16. My child that has every right to bear those eyes and every right to keep those reasons to himself. You are not entitled to an information from him, and I will not allow you to bully my child into saying more than he wants to. Naruto's BLD red glare only hardened the more he spoke. Anger heating up until it was ready to bubble out of the pot or explode, whichever came first. How dare this man subject his kid to this? They were in peace times. An era where children could grow up at a more laid-back pace, where they could afford to be children for a while instead of being shoved into the front line as cannon fodder, forced to fill shoes much too big for their little feet. All his friends, family, had very nearly given their lives for this peace, in the hope that they could build a future where the next generation could see life as a blessing rather than a necessity or habit. Who the hell was this man to cart his child off to T&I and interrogate him like some criminal when he had done nothing wrong? This treaty comes with many rewards but also with many risks. Trusting you is a risk, a big one. One that we certainly aren't willing to take if we are in a position where we can't trust you. Withholding information as vital as this is not something we can just shrug off. We need answers. The Uchiha replied firmly, not backing down even an inch. Naruto was actually impressed. It had been a long while since someone had the guts to face his fury head-on. Figures that it would be a version of his husband to stand firm against him, proving that in any life, he was not afraid of him and would never run from a fight. I understand that there are risks, but trust is not something you have the right to demand from me or my family, especially if you yourself are not willing to give us a chance to explain our situation before jumping to the worst conclusion and attempting to persecute a child because of it. You clearly have no trust for us, so why should we offer you that courtesy? Naruto returned coolly, his anger and indignation turning frosty. Less inclined to explode but still ready to burn if needed. The Uchiha seemed to hesitate, unable to deny the hypocrisy. Naruto absently pondered what his next move would be. He knew his husband. Specifically, he knew his husband was stubborn. Sasuke was extremely intelligent. Some would even call him a genius. Not quite to the degree of his brother but above average. However, he tended to let his heart take front and center, inserting bias into nearly every decision. Naruto wasn't judging. Oh, he was more guilty of it than his husband. He appreciated it though. It meant that Naruto didn't have to puzzle out the inner complexities of his spouse's mind. He only needed to know the man's heart, which was thankfully one thing that he was good at. The way he saw it. The Uchiha had two options. He could continue to fight and call them unreasonable for the sake of pride, or he could admit fault and de-escalate the situation. Naruto mentally prepped himself for a fight. Sasuke Uchiha is a prideful man. Sasuke sighed, slowly raising his gaze to meet Naruto's. And, would you be willing to explain? He carefully asked, all the sharp coldness previously present in his voice replaced by something that felt almost respectful. And if Naruto didn't know his husband as well as he did, he likely would have missed the subtle apology hidden beneath the emotionless mask and calculated words. Seems that Sasuke was still capable of surprising him. The blonde allowed his anger to fizzle out, expelling from his body in one long exhale. He could feel his hair gently settle on his back as the red in his eyes retreated, returning to their ocean blue. He turned his head slightly to lock eyes with his husband, keeping the other in his peripheral, and nodded, moving to sit at the seat his son vacated as he felt his husband leave the room. Ask. Boru jumped rooftops as fast as he could. Which really wasn't that quick, considering how much chakra he expended while sparring with Konoha. But he still threw all the chakra he still had spare into getting to his twin, Naruto, and Konoha following close behind. He has no doubt that they easily could have overtaken him, but they remained a few feet behind, keeping pace with him. He briefly allowed himself to wonder if they were doing it for his sake or their own. After all, Boru had felt Mama and Papa's chakra enter the village just under a minute ago, and he has no doubt that Naruto, being a skilled sensor, would have felt it too. They probably didn't want to face off against them without him there as a buffer. Tracking Menma's chakra found him nearing the torture and interrogation building, and he felt his stomach twist. Why was his brother in there? Boru felt the world around him begin to slow down, as if he was in some sort of limbo where he was moving too fast for the world around him to keep up. It was sharp, every thought firing through his head at an increasingly rapid pace, every sense he had funneling his attention into the approaching building and the person behind its doors. He was starting to feel nauseous, the slow motion of the world around him becoming increasingly unsettling. He distantly got the vague impression that the world was getting very silent. His breathing became labored, his chest tightening as he felt his lungs desperately reach for air that just wasn't there. But that didn't matter. His twin needed him. He needed to get there. His legs sluggishly sped up, reluctant to follow his orders. He needed to power through. Just get to him and everything would be fine again. He just needed Menma. But the faster he ran, the more he felt the knot in his stomach growing, until he was certain that he was going to throw up at any second. His body felt like a drum, the throbbing beat of his heart ricocheting dizzyingly in his skull. But that didn't matter. Because he had reached the building and the doors were right in front of him and Menma. They slammed headfirst into each other, both moving too fast to stop in time to avoid the collision. Menma groaned, rubbing his forehead, somewhat aware of his body moving him into a sitting position on habit. Admittedly, he couldn't focus on much of anything with the pain making the center of his forehead throb, and Naruto and Konoha being very loud at that moment was not helping at all. Damn it, why did his twin have such a hard head? Both literally and figuratively. He was about to ask him just that when very fast and labored breaths registered in his mind. His eyes snapped open, ignoring the pain light caused him, he focused on his twin. He was sitting on the ground. Well, it was more of a sprawl than a seated position staring at Menma with unseeing, tear-filled eyes, seemingly unable to catch his breath. Without wasting more than a few seconds, he pushed past Naruto and Konoha, who were unsuccessfully trying to check if his twin was okay, and sank to his knees right in front of Boru. Keeping his voice low and unobtrusive, he gently asked if he could touch the blonde, not moving until he got a shaky nod. He grasped the blonde's hand and moved it to his chest, taking slow and deliberate breaths, hoping Boru would take his lead and mimic the steady rise and fall. After waiting for a short while, he began whispering to Boru in a calm, low tone, reminding him of who was talking to him and where he was, before resuming his steady deep breaths. Menma's free hand went to the back of Boru's head and cradled him to his chest while combing through his blonde locks the same way Mama did to calm them down. Eventually, Boru started taking deeper and more even breaths, seeming to be leagues calmer than he was moments ago. Before Menma could ask what happened, his twin had launched himself at Menma, squeezing him in a bear hug and burying his face into the crook of the raven's neck, mumbling something along the lines of, "Thank Kami you're okay," over and over again. Menma needed no further invitation and immediately returned the hug, making sure to squeeze extra tight because everything was a competition. He almost snorted when Boru's grip tightened suddenly as Menma felt what could only have been some form of exasperated sigh against his neck. Loosening his hold on the blonde, Menma allowed himself to relax. It wasn't often that Boru got panic attacks that severe. They were ninja, and wouldn't be allowed anywhere near the field if they were more a liability than an asset in a crisis. But Menma knows his twin. The same twin that loves their family with such a burning ferocity that it bordered on insanity. Most of them did. It was the Uchiha side of them. It probably didn't help that they were basically isolated from all forms of backup while in this universe. Either way, everything was alright now that Menma had brought him back down. He resolutely ignored the small, traitorous part of his brain that asked him what would have happened if he hadn't been there to calm his twin. Because he would always be there for his twin. "Are you okay?" Boru looked at him as if he was stupid. "Fair. Am I Yuji?" "What do you mean am I okay?" I'm not sure how to answer that. Is there another meaning of that question besides the obvious one? Boru looked like he was about to tear out his own hair. Or Menma's. Probably Menma's. Boru took a very deep breath, followed by a very slow exhale before continuing. Yes, I am fine. What about you? I couldn't help but notice the tidal wave of fear I could sense through your chakra from a mile away. Menma winced. That was a good point. Right, yeah, about that, we gotta go. What? Yeah, Mama and Papa are about to beat the SHT out of Sasuke in there and Naruto cut in. Your parents are doing what? Menma gave an annoyed sigh. Well, they didn't appreciate walking in on their child being threatened for information dash. He did what? This time it was Boru that interrupted. Naruto winced in the background. Look, we don't have time. Mama said that we need to go and pack our things. Indeed. All heads present swiveled around as Sasuke Uchimaki stepped out of the T&I building. Get your things. I'm going to have a talk with these two. He stated, not taking his eyes off Naruto and Konohamaru as he addressed the twins. Both teens nodded and left without another word. Papa would handle it. Chapter 13 Sasuke Uchimaki watched as his children left, ensuring they were well out of earshot before speaking up. I sincerely hope that there is a good reason why Menma was in T&I. The Naruto in front of him scratched the back of his head in embarrassment and Sasuke had to remind himself that this was not his husband nor the mother of his children. This man had endangered one of them, he couldn't trust him. No matter how much his heart ached to believe in him. Kami, he needed a goddamn drink. We didn't really know what else to do. Naruto said dismissively, trying to phrase this incident as less severe than it was. Sasuke arched one of his eyebrows, not accepting the excuse. So, you just decided to torture him and be done with it. Naruto flinched. We never intended to hurt him, we just had to know what was going on and if we needed to be worried. Right. This is the same thing that his counterpart had said, and he did not have the patience nor the sanity to have this conversation twice. He also wasn't certain on which details his husband and Kage would be willing to share. Might as well make sure the kids are following their instructions. Cheeky, lovable brats. Naruto is explaining everything you need to know to the me of this universe. Go and listen to him if you need to know so badly. He didn't wait for acknowledgement. He just body flickered to the house his children were in. Ask. Sasuke paused for a moment, not expecting this outcome at all. He wasn't expecting the Naruto and Sasuke from the other universe to respond, never mind that quickly. Naruto had told him that his counterpart said that they could communicate with his children, but he wasn't expecting it to be linked to their chakra. Because there was nothing else that could have given him away. But it still made no sense. Sasuke didn't think it was possible that this other Naruto would be able to sense their chakra from a whole universe away. How strong of a sensor did one have to be to pull that off? Was his Naruto capable of that too? Or was this other Naruto that much stronger than theirs? That was an uncomfortable thought. Either way, bottom line is he screwed up. It appeared his only saving grace was that this Naruto was as lenient and forgiving as his own. Especially if he was as strong as his sensor abilities suggested. Sasuke did not think that was a fight that he could win, even if he had the advantage of home base. Would he be honest though? He could read his Naruto like an open book, but this one seemed to be much better at lying. Or it could be his lack of experience interacting with this version of the blonde. What did he have to lose anyway? The other Naruto was right. The only way he could inspire trust was to offer it up first. Sasuke could give this man, always this man, a chance. At least until proven otherwise. He opened his mouth to ask his first question when he was cut off by the door opening. They turned up to see a defeated-looking Naruto entering the room. When he noticed the questioning stares being leveled at him, he sighed. I was told that I could get the answers I'm looking for here. Naruto nodded and gestured for him to take a seat next to Sasuke. The Uchiha tried his best not to show how relieved he was to have his blonde in the room with him. He tried even harder to smother down his blush when their sides brushed against each other for a moment as Naruto sat down. To his sheer mortification, the other Naruto appeared to have noticed it, if the barely suppressed surprise and consideration in his expression was any indication. Unfortunately, his Naruto remained oblivious as his glanced questioningly between the two. That moron. When the silence stretched a little too long, Sasuke abruptly realized that he had been about to ask the first question. Right back to this mess. I am going to give you the courtesy of assuming that Menma's eyes were not stolen. But if that isn't the case, how did he get them? Some of the coldness in Naruto's expression seemed to melt away, and Sasuke was more than a little relieved. Were the eyes given to him as a gift? Like Kakashi? Sasuke briefly glanced at Naruto when he asked the question. a little surprised. He hadn't even considered that. Partly because of how rarely such a thing occurred, but mostly because there isn't anyone around to gift him the Sharingan. He was the only Uchiha left after the Fourth Shinobi War, and the other him definitely still has his eyes. The only other option would be Sarada? Sasuke was suddenly very interested in what the man in front of him had to say. What happened to Sarada? Did she get hurt? Was she dead? Hell, does a version of Sarada even exist in this other world? The eyes weren't stolen nor gifted. They are his from Byakuya. Thank Kami. Sasuke felt like he could breathe again. At least, if he had a daughter in this different universe, she was alive and well. Then the rest of the statement fully registered. From Byakuya. Menma's an Uchiha. Naruto blurted in shock. But I thought he was you're our son. He spluttered. The other Naruto remained unfazed by the outburst and kept both his face and tie neutral when he replied. He is. Boruto had been having a good day. Finally. It felt like he hadn't had one of those since those stupid twins showed up. He had been excited at first. Who wouldn't be? How often do you get to meet another version of yourself from a different world, right? Wrong. That excitement quickly turned to anger and resentment. Boruto already knew he had to protect his family from his useless old man, and he had been doing that. What nobody told him was that he had to protect them from these twins too. And the worst part was that he seemed to be the only one to see how they consistently lie to cause harm and emotionally manipulate those around them. But that didn't matter right now because the twins were going to be out for the whole day, and Boruto had invited his friends to his place to hang out and play video games. And it had been going great. He had managed to score more wins than Inogen and Shikadai. The girls, plus Mitsuki and Lee, were having fun chatting and hollering at the game while waiting for their turns, and Mom had been nice enough to make them some snacks too. Everything had been perfect until the door slammed open and the twins darted into the house and straight upstairs to their rooms. What's up with them? Sarada asked. Ignore them. They're always weird. Boruto replied in a huff, good mood vanishing. I thought you said that they wouldn't be home until this evening. The blank, airy voice of Mitsuki pointed out. Boruto vaguely took notice of how the chatter in the room silenced, everyone now paying attention to what he had to say. They were supposed to be. I don't know why they're back early. Do you think something happened? Inogen asked, looking a little nervous. They're fine. Boruto grit out. Probably just being dramatic. That was when another Sasuke appeared in the doorway. When he opened his eyes again, he was standing in a medium-sized home with 8 teenagers staring at him. Fantastic. Papa. Sensei. He raised an unimpressed eyebrow at who he assumed to be Boruto and Sarada. Yes. The confirmation only seemed to make them more excited for some reason. You're from the other dimension as well. Sarada practically demanded, clearly quite thrilled. I am. Truthfully, Sasuke had little to no idea of what to do in this situation. Having a horde of kids only really trained him on how to interact with those specific kids through paying attention to all their quirks and interests. A lot of effort that he, quite frankly, was not willing to put into children that he didn't need to communicate with daily. He was still of the opinion that children were annoying, expensive and messy, with the only exception being his own. They were simply better than all the others. Even his husband couldn't get him to become a social butterfly. Contrary to popular belief, Naruto Uzumaki was not a miracle worker. Which is why he typically left his husband to be the cool uncle and do most of the talking. But, of course, his husband wasn't here. Great. What's our family like over there? He has no idea what the twins have divulged during their stay here. Was it even possible to get through this conversation without accidentally contradicting them? He quickly deduced that being extremely vague was his only option here. Big. He stated in a monotone voice, mentally cursing when he saw her eyes go wide. Big. Their family was big. Sarada couldn't even imagine what that would be like. She was used to existing in a home that was fairly empty and quiet, considering that it was only her and Mama for a long time. How would that even work? With Mama spending so much time at the hospital and Papa being out of the village for long periods of time, she didn't think they'd have the time to be looking after a young child, never mind several. Also, her parents didn't really seem like the type to want more children. Sarada never saw them acting couple-wise. No hand-holding, no kisses on cheeks, no cuddling on the couch to watch a movie after a long day of work, and definitely no signs of that. Sarada quickly banished the thought from her mind. For a moment, just a moment, she allowed herself to envision what that kind of life would look like. Her traitorous heart sank, feeling heavier than before. She wanted that. Wanted to have more people to talk to relate to, maybe even to dote on. She mentally shook her head. Mama was trying her best and Papa. She knew he loved her, even if he wasn't the best at showing it. She had two parents that loved her. She was much more fortunate than many others in the world. Demanding more from them isn't fair. The other her was so lucky. The twins appeared back in the doorway with their backpacks just as Hinata came to investigate. Sasuke briefly paused, wondering why she was here before remembering the offhand comment Naru had made about this Boruto being part Hyuga. Ah, you must be the Sasuke from this other universe then. Chin. Her porcelain features lightly pinched into a confused frown. If you don't mind me asking, what are you doing here? I was under the impression that the twins would be staying with us for another day or two. Plans have changed, we're leaving, we can stay a little longer. Sasuke turned to Menma because it was always Menma, with a glare. I apologize if I gave the impression that this decision was in any way up for debate. He felt both satisfied and remorseful when the brat shivered at his tone. Stupid offspring making him go soft. What he means to say is, and there goes the other one. Sasuke sometimes wondered if it was the fact they were twins that inspired the endless loyalty. That or the many lectures about it that he regularly gave to all his children. In his defense, he didn't intend for those lectures to be used as an excuse to stand up to his authority. We can't go back without Dad's seal, and he could be stuck in that meeting for a while. It can't hurt to let us stay here in the meantime. Bora finished, and Diamenit, it was a good point. Menma, now recovered, nodded vigorously. Sasuke sighed the sigh of the long-suffering. Fine. But you aren't allowed to leave this house. The twins brightened. Sasuke refused to acknowledge how cute it was, and practically skipped towards the other children gathered in the living room of this house. Would you like something to drink? Coffee. The Uchimaki turned towards the Hyuga, or was she an Uzumaki? Sasuke knew he was a jealous man, but he didn't previously think he would be a try-to-stake claim of his husband in other universes kind of jealous man. He nodded and followed her into the kitchen, slightly regretting his decision when he realized that he would probably have to socialize with her. The things he did for those incorrigible brats. Chapter 14 He is. Sasuke's brain felt like it stuttered to a halt. Distantly he was also aware of Naruto going still and quiet beside him. Menma is an Uchiha, but also an Uzumaki. How is that possible? Itachi killed everyone. Sasuke had watched Itachi kill everyone. He and Obito were the only Uchiha spared. No woman survived the massacre. Hell, Sasuke didn't even know many women from his clan. There was his mother, and he vaguely remembers his brother being close to a girl. Her name was Inari. No, Izumi. Maybe she. No. The twins were still half Uzumaki. For them to have inherited the Sharingan, it would have had to come from someone in the main or branch family. But neither families had any daughters. Who the hell did Naruto marry? Naruto didn't know how to react. Rationally he knew that in hindsight, assuming that his love life and marriage would be identical in both universes was extremely presumptuous, especially after learning how their family sizes and dynamics differed. But honestly, the thought hadn't even crossed his mind. He had gotten used to his life. His reality was that he had a wife, Hinata, and their two children. He didn't really make room in his mind for any other possibilities. Hell, he probably would have expected his children to be the same if that belief hadn't been demolished upon first meeting. I knew Menma's hair was a little too dark. And you didn't say anything. Naruto mentally berated, feeling very betrayed by his resident furball. Do I look like an expert on genetics? Sometimes kids don't look identical to the parents. I didn't think it would turn into the conspiracy theory of the century. Though it would explain why both of them have one black eye. I'm closing the link, you're being annoying. Naruto watched the pair in front of him try to rationalize what he had revealed to them. He hadn't really been planning on telling them anything concrete. Like his counterpart, he had originally been planning to claim that the twins had each been gifted one Sharingan eye, an excuse that would have been strengthened by the heterochromia both possess, and exaggerate grief in the hopes that they would have been too uncomfortable/sympathetic to push for any details regarding who gave them the eyes. But that changed when he saw them interact with each other. He hadn't lied to his children when he said that he feared some fallout breaking this Naruto and Sasuke apart, feared that his children could be caught in the middle of whatever had come between them, feared his children would face mistreatment because of some misplaced anger due to their background. He had experienced in full how people would find a scapegoat to shove their hurt onto if they couldn't take it out on the person who was responsible for it, and he had sworn to himself that he would never allow any of his children to be caught in the crossfire. But deep down, a lot of that fear was because he knows himself and his husband better than anyone. They are committed to each other on a level that some days feels absolutely terrifying, consumed by a love that leaves no room for doubt as to how far they would go for each other and their children, a love that would drive them mad if they were to lose one another. So when he saw no signs of Sasuke around, he had assumed the worst. Because he knew, in his heart and in his soul, that he would never give up Sasuke unless something unforgivable happened. That he would only turn his back on him if the anger and the hate grew so hot that it burned through all the love that bound them to each other. And as much as he believed in himself to be kind to innocent children, hate clouds judgment and drives people to do unforgivable things, he had seen what it did to his husband when they were young. However, when Naruto entered the room there was no anger, no hatred. In fact, he seemed to relax marginally, posture relaxing, fists unclenching and breathing slowing once he saw the Uchiha. And he couldn't keep his eyes off him for long. Despite himself being the largest threat in the room, the Uzumaki only watched him enough to remain vigilant. It was clear that at least half of his focus was elsewhere, considering how he kept glancing at the man beside him, tracing his every move and facial expression out of the corner of his eye as if it pained him to look away. Sasuke wasn't much better. The relief he felt when his counterpart entered the room was almost potent enough for Naruto to taste. Never mind the BLD that flooded to his cheeks when their bodies so much as brushed each other. Gosh, had his husband always been this cute. Well done, Uchimaki. Well done. He would have felt bad for his paranoia, but these were his baby boys. He thought it was normal for him to be overprotective of them. He would apologize to the lovesick morons by telling them the truth. All of you disgust me. You're just mad you're single and alone. The blonde lazily retorted. What was that, you little brat? No women survived the massacre in this universe. Who did you marry? Sasuke asked after he was able to get all his mental ducks in a row. As far as I am aware, no women survived the massacre in our universe either. The other Naruto replied smoothly. Sasuke frowned, about to point out how he just said that he married an Uchiha before he continued. He hesitated before speaking slowly and carefully. I married a man dash, did this BHF my brother I swear to. And that man happens to be Sasuke. He finished as his glaze slid towards Naruto. Oh, thank Kami, wait, the BHF me? Naruto misheard. There was no other explanation. It was just one of those times where he accidentally stopped paying attention and lost track of the conversation. But Sasuke's reaction was making it very difficult for Naruto to convince himself he was stupid and deaf. The man had gone bright red, he kinda looks like the tomatoes he loves, laughing face, and appeared to have stopped breathing. Naruto faced his counterpart. This has got to be a joke. Nope, the other man was staring at him impassively. No trace of humor nor amusement. But this just was not possible. Two men can't produce children, he said. Asked. Most men can't have children, yes. Then, how? A large part of Kurama's healing abilities includes growing back organs, especially when they're punctured or damaged. I simply requested, begged. Shut up. That he made me a few extra. Of course, to make that work I had to sacrifice some teeth, hence the decreased muscle mass and height, but other than having to adjust to my WMB trying to eat itself every month or so, being intersex isn't that bad. Really, the hardest part is the pregnancies themselves. The morning sickness and muscle pains are killer, the cravings are annoying, and the BLD pressure spikes when I was PRGNT with the twins made me want to throw myself off a bridge. But oh, the results are so worth it. Naruto abruptly cut off his rambling and focused back on the two in front of him. Both gazing at him with blank, Sasuke, and horrified Naruto faces. He graciously decided to keep quiet and give them a chance to recover. In the meantime, he entertained himself with lovely thoughts of his children wrestling, like the feral little shits they are, in his backyard. They should really start figuring out a name for their next little monster. But, Boru said that they had 8 siblings. Naruto began before freezing and going as red as Sasuke. After another 5 minutes, Naruto was starting to get bored of waiting for them to pull themselves together. How about we start making our way to your place and you guys can continue having a mental crisis on the walk there? Naruto rhetorically asked his counterpart before cheerfully getting up and dragging them to their feet. Meanwhile, this was awkward. Sasuke thought as he and the Hyuga sat on opposite sides of the kitchen table, each nursing a cup of coffee that was starting to grow cold. He was distantly aware that he should probably say something to break the silence, but thing is, he didn't really want to. He almost never felt that anxious, tingly awkwardness that pushed you to fill in gaps in the conversation the way others did. Sasuke blames the trauma, his husband blames his lack of social skills and manners. So, what are the twins like? The woman asks softly, her fiddling temporarily pausing now that she has found a conversation starter. Sasuke paused for a moment, confused. You've met them. She sighs with a small smile, lightly shaking her head. This girl better not be patronizing me like I'm one of her spawn. I'm a stranger to them. I assume they're much more comfortable around you than me. I want to know what they're like when they're not nervous about making a good first impression. HN. Sasuke never really thought about how his children act around people they just met. He was a little busy trying to successfully maintain his own relationship with them to worry about others. He took a moment to consider the question. They're strong, intelligent, talented. Most of the time they're polite. I can't really ask for more than that. Sasuke states quite blandly, not really thinking too deeply about his answer. The Hyuga furrows her brows slightly. What? Did he say something wrong? Why would she? Oh. She doesn't know they're his kids. Diamond, that sounded very parental, didn't it? As my students, they make pleasing progress and it's rare to find teenagers that actually listen to your instructions most of the time. He quickly added, hoping that she would accept it. Thankfully, her expression smoothed out and she nodded. Nailed it. I see. Boruto is just about to start his teenage years, and I have heard that things will get very difficult with him. Do you have any advice? Gosh, she's committed to keeping this conversation going. He'll mostly stop listening, get moody, and he'll want lots of space. But you need to keep paying attention. He'll want independence to solve every problem on his own. Likely won't ask for help even if he desperately needs it. Things can spiral out of control very quickly if you stop looking out for him. Just make sure you don't suffocate him. When he looked back at her, she was looking at him with mild shock and seemed grateful. Gross feelings? I thank you. You seem to have experience. Oh my word, did this girl get experience in torture and interrogation when I wasn't looking? I do have teens. You did mention to Sarada that you had a big family. Honestly, I was a bit taken aback considering you and Sakura only have Sarada over here. Sasuke threw up in his mouth a little. He kept a straight face though he was a professional. Sakura Haruno. That was his goddamn sister she was talking about. The thought of doing the deed with her, oh my god, that mental image will haunt him for the rest of his life. He'll need to cleanse himself with his sunshine tonight. Now that's a good idea. Author's note. His face has remained blank this whole time by the way. I see. Not sure what caused the difference. As if he'd start a large family with her. She smiled and nodded. She seemed to do that a lot. There seems to be many more differences than any of us were expecting. Chin. Ain't that the truth? The front door opened to reveal his gorgeous husband who really was a sight for sore eyes, followed to two slightly traumatized-looking counterparts who really were quite underwhelming in comparison to his man. Sasuke sipped his black coffee. This should get interesting. Chapter 15. Naruto walked back to his house with his counterpart and his best friend. Brother. Lover. No, he couldn't be Sasuke's lover. They had never been like that. And either way he is married to Hinata. He has a wife. He would remain firm in his vows. He made a promise to her, in front of Kami, their family and friends, and he would not break it. And he didn't, for all of 15 seconds. As much as it physically pained him, he couldn't stop thinking of Sasuke that way. It was like a door had been opened in his mind, now clearly showing every action he's ever taken in a completely different light, with new implications he previously didn't know existed. Through it he could see himself devoting years and years of his life chasing down this man in the name of what he had truly believed to be brotherly duty, throwing himself into harm's way time and time again to protect him, even when all the odds seemed to be stacked against them. When he put his own neck on the line to vouch for Sasuke's innocence, regardless of whether he could believe it himself. Which could mostly, somewhat be explained as having a friend's back or ensure the strongest soldiers live to fight another day. Hell, Naruto had put himself directly in harm's way for too many people to count. Sasuke wasn't special in that regard. Totally. But the longer he thought about it, the longer it unbiddenly rolled around in his mind like the most persistently annoying tumbleweed that Naruto had ever known, the more he was forced to realize that it wasn't just in battle. It was also in those quieter moments. Whenever he felt scared or out of depth. Sasuke was always the first person he turned to for help, guidance, even for a shoulder to cry on, as proven recently. Objectively, he knew that Hinata was far more emotionally adept and all-around available than Sasuke, yet the thought of going to her didn't even cross his mind. He didn't trust her the way he did Sasuke. And when he was feeling ugly, when anger, hatred and all the other poisonous feelings threatened to overwhelm him and seize his control, Sasuke was the one who was there to help him fight them back. It felt like there was something deep in his soul that caused him to know, with absolute certainty, that no one else would be able to handle his rage. Not without getting consumed and burn themselves. They would fear him. Sasuke never feared him. And Naruto was only just beginning to understand how addicting that knowledge was after living his life as a monster. And that was the truth, wasn't it? He was addicted to Sasuke. His mind and body ached for him constantly, whether he was near in the village or far away on some mission. Naruto was always in a state of longing for his acknowledgement, needing to bask in Sasuke's attention like a cat in a sunlit spot. Oh my Kami. He was in love with Sasuke. He's been in love with Sasuke for what could easily be considered most of his life. Naruto felt the tickle in his cheeks indicative of a blush and only had a minute to bask in it before reality crashed down and threatened to drown him. He'd been having an emotional affair with Sasuke for his whole marriage to Hinata, maybe even their whole relationship. They had just passed Sakura and Sasuke's house, even if it was mostly Sakura's, and it wouldn't be too much longer before they arrived at his home. Hinata would be there. Naruto was starting to feel just a little weak in the knees. Could he face her? Would he be able to look her in the eye knowing that he had been lying to her for years, however unknowingly? And did any of this even matter? Like huzzah. He's realized his feelings. Big whoop. Sarcasm. But what happens now? Reasonably he knew that things with Hinata were not over, not at all. And the great thing about emotional affairs with long-distance partners was the lack of proof. Technically, his options were still open. He was in a position where he could be the one to choose how things play out from here. Not to mention the kids. Naruto was already failing all of them, Boruto especially. Would they ever forgive him if he ripped their family apart? Would he ever forgive himself? Did Sasuke even want him? An evil voice in the back of his mind whispered. What if he did it all? Broke Hinata's heart, destroyed his kid's home, gave up the first family he ever got to experience. All for nothing. What was the point in doing anything if he was just going to end up alone at the end of it all? And he was being really selfish, wasn't he? This decision, this one choice, could ruin much more than just his feelings. How could he ever get out of bed again if he destroyed any sense of stability in Hinata's, Kawaki's, Boruto's, Himawari's, Sakura's, Sarada's, Sasuke's lives because he wasn't satisfied with an amazing life that he had dreamed about since he was a boy? He couldn't. Ever. Right. He didn't know. What the hell was wrong with him? His heart and mind were pulling him in two opposite directions and his soul was about to be torn to shreds in the middle. He felt dazed and confused. Each revelation had come to him with all the grace and subtlety of a slap to the face, and he was stuck in that speechless limbo, holding his face while waiting for his brain to catch up with what was happening around him. They arrived at his house. And he still didn't. No. Naruto was a little confused and just a touch upset when he arrived at his counterpart's house, the place where his kids had been staying, only to not find his children and husband packed and ready to go. That being said, he could hear lots of laughter coming from the house. Children's laughter, many more children that he was led to believe would be in the house, and a warm energy radiating from all present inside. Well, except his husband's. Sa's chakra was flitty and nervous in that panicky sort of way that it usually got when he was stuck in a conversation that he was desperate to get out of. It was practically a cry for help. Naruto couldn't resist the upwards tugging at the corners of his lips as he opened the front door. This should be interesting, all right. Much to his delight surprise, there was a whole crowd of kids gathered in the living room, chatting and playing a game that Naruto could vaguely remember Boru referring to as Mario Kart. And sitting at the kitchen island was his Moonlight and Hinata. Well, at least he was assuming it's Hinata. Though her hair was much shorter than what he was expecting, but what interested him most was her overall demeanor. Don't get him wrong, her posture was perfect as expected for the Hyuga heiress. But it still felt as if she was always trying to shrink in on herself and become as unnoticeable as possible. It reminded him of how she was as a genin in his universe. Her clothes also looked pretty baggy. Which wasn't a crime. Fashion comes in all shapes and sizes. Sakura taught him that he was almost never in a position to judge. But when paired with her shyness and the knowledge that her counterpart typically preferred clothing that hugged her waist, it implied that she was much more timid than she wanted people to think. Which brought him back in a full circle back to, why was she chatting with Sasuke of all people? Naruto loves his man with his whole heart, but he was not the gentlest individual, especially not with his words. There was a reason Naruto had to drag him kicking and screaming through no less than 4 parenting courses. Kurama. Am I hallucinating? Nope. And it's a good thing too. Uchiha's face is priceless. Either use his first name or his entire last name. But you have a point. It didn't much help that his love was looking at him as if he was his savior. Much to his husband's obvious chagrin, he couldn't hold back the chuckle that escaped his lips. It was always amusing when SS would send him those desperate and pleading expressions whenever he needed to be rescued from social interactions, the only time he'd ever allow Naruto to save him without getting prissy about it. He turned his head to Hinata and gave a polite bow. Sorry for the intrusion. I'm not sure how much your husband told you, but I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Thank you for taking care of my boys this past week. She blushed lightly and waved away his gratitude. Oh, it really was no trouble at all. You raised amazing boys, they were perfectly polite the whole time. And my name is Hinata Hyuga. She replies, returning the bow and inviting them towards the island and offering them drinks. Naruto declines the offer. His counterpart and Sasuke just mutely shake their heads. He approached the island, sitting down next to his husband and gently pushing the other Naruto and Sasuke to take a seat. Damn it. They both still looked dazed. He knew that he would be dropping a bomb on them, but was it really this bad? Maybe he just isn't understanding the gravity because it was his life and he was used to it. He would let them sleep on it, he decided. If further conversations needed to happen tomorrow, then they would happen tomorrow. Until then, he could only hope that they both got adequate time to come to terms with his not-so-little family and their fairly obvious feelings for each other. Now that Naruto thought about it, it was probably the latter that was causing all that distress. Hinata had noticed how quiet her husband was being. Naruto did not envy his counterpart for having to have that conversation. A conversation that he didn't look even slightly ready for. It seems a topic change is in order. Turning to his husband, he put on the most unimpressed face he could manage. It was probably unsuccessful considering it was heavily diluted by pity for the man's social ineptitude. The twins don't look especially packed and ready to go, he stated pointedly. Sasuke sighed and placed down the coffee mug he had been subtly hiding behind, only looking a tad defeated. They wish to change the plans. I'm leaving the decision to you. You're weak. I have working self-preservation instincts. Your demon spawn wish to negotiate with you. The more time you leave them to plan, the more prepared they'll be with counterattacks. Naruto rolled his eyes and stood up, making his way towards the gaggle of children while pointedly ignoring Hinata's amused little smile. As soon as Naruto entered the living room, he was attacked by his two not-so-little-anymore monsters. Dad. He paused for only a moment, but he's a professional liar and just went with the new nickname, assuming that his children had a reason for the change, and allowing himself to be hit with the combined force of their weights and pushed to the ground in a very aggressive pile of affection. He quickly began greeting them back, laughing at their eagerness, returning their cuddles and kissing their foreheads. He cherished these moments where he was allowed to shower them with love without being called embarrassing. My babies. The title earned groans from the babies in question. We're 16. AKA legal adults in the land of Kumo. Naruto snorted and shook his head, causing Boru and Menma to pull identical pouts. Gently removing his gremlins from his person, he subtly looked them over. He was allowed to be paranoid when it came to his children's well-being. But alas, no bruising or any obvious favoring of either side could be detected. He felt as if a massive weight had been lifted from his shoulders when he couldn't see any signs of injury on either boy. Their rough tackling earlier seemed to support this, given that they didn't seem all too worried about any sore spots being jostled or prodded. Once the first priority had been sorted, he moved to the second and put on his stern expression. So, what's this I hear about plans changing? And with that, our journey comes to a close. But the world of Animeverse Fanfics is just beginning. Thank you for being part of this adventure. Your support means everything. Subscribe, like, and share to keep these stories alive, and tell us in the comments, what should our next series be? Until we meet again, stay inspired and keep imagining. Every ending is just a new beginning waiting to be written.